Greetings, History 141 students. This is your professor, John Fia. I am here with the Founding Fathers, as usual. Megan Piette is behind the camera, and we are ready to dive into the last third of the United States History Survey class, History 141. We had an exam earlier this week, and we are now beginning to look at the period between the end of the War of 1812, 1815, say, and the Civil War, 1815 to 1865. That period we'll be examining now, from now until the end of the semester. If you remember, last week we got started with this even before the exam took place. We covered some material that you'll be responsible for on the next exam. And what I tried to talk about there was some economic history in the wake of the War of 1812. Specifically as it related to this renewed sense of nationalism that emerges in the country after that war. And we talked about nationalism in a variety of different ways, but we really focused on nationalism in a symbolic way, first of all, this sort of feeling that the nation begins to get as many people start to think of themselves more as a nation than they do as members of individual states. But again, it's a tenuous idea of nationhood. There's still strong local attachments, especially in the South, but elsewhere. And then we tried to look at the way in which economic life, the market, transportation revolution, played into the way in which these later Jeffersonian presidents like Madison and especially Monroe and John Quincy Adams begin to craft a sense of nationalism. And I think what the most striking thing to me is, and I stress this in lecture, is just how much those later Jeffersonian presidents begin to adopt some of the political and economic vision for the country that the Federalists and especially Alexander Hamilton had embraced all the way back in the 1790s. So you see Jeffersonian Republicans advocating things like manufacturing, advocating things like connecting people from locales through roads and bridges. You see them keeping Hamilton's National Bank. You even see Madison keeping a small standing army. Remember, in Whig political thought, standing armies are always a bad thing because they have the potential to threaten liberty as rulers use those armies to exercise their arbitrary will over the people. So that's one of the more interesting phenomenons. Yes, the Jeffersonians have dominated the first quarter of the century politically in the 19th century, but by the end of by the 1820s and 30s, these Jeffersonian Republicans have really embraced economic philosophies and even political philosophies and a sense of nationhood that Alexander Hamilton and others Federalists were talking about long ago. So again, that's the key. Those are the things that I want you to think about. Now, how does that play out? Remember, we talked a little bit about, actually a lot about, the way in which the leaders of the country in this period want to build these roads, these bridges, these canals to connect people, to take people out of their local farms and their local communities and connect them to markets so that they can get access to goods. Those markets are going to have some manufacturing. Again, back to the Hamiltonian vision. Roads, you need to build roads and canals and bridges to connect these people to markets. And as a result, as you begin to connect people physically through the development of an infrastructure, you begin to develop a nation, and you lift people out of their parochialism or their locales and make them and connect them or force them to see themselves as something larger. And in some ways, it is that kind of road building, canal building, that really cultivates this sense of nationalism in the country at this time. We talked a little bit about the creation of the Erie Canal and the development of a working class that comes out of that, made up of largely immigrants, Irish and German immigrants, who are actually doing the physical labor of digging the Erie Canal. And really, for the first time in this period, there is a sort of very defined kind of working class, if you want to call it that, consciousness in America. And then we ended the lecture talking about manufacturing and the way in which these manufacturing centers, these factories, begin to emerge. You can read in your textbook more about the Lowell factory mills. But these manufacturing centers begin to produce cheaper goods. It becomes very, very dangerous, if you will, for skilled artisans, who are making, say, a shoemaker in Lynn, Massachusetts, who's making the entire shoe himself, and then along comes this mass manufacturing, and the shoes are now cheaper, and it kind of undermines the social and economic authority that shoemaker has in his community. So again, these are some ways the consequences of this nationalism and this sort of more universal vision over the local vision. So think about that. When you think about nationalism, don't just think about sort of rah-rah patriotism and feeling that America's great, or these symbolic gestures, but also think about the way nationalism in this period, or this sense of national identity, is constructed economically through manufacturing, through markets, through roads, bridges, and canals. And later on, we're actually going to talk about the way in which the Southern economy is also developing at this time, and they're going to be developing a little bit different. So I hope that you're getting this. I hope that the class is going well for you, and we'll see you next time on the office hours.